Welcome to this episode of Float Activity. Today, I have a conversation with Jacquelyn Son. She is a spiritual content creator on TikTok and host of the Glow Radio podcast, where she has raw conversations on relationships, career, and life overall with a spiritual and astrological twist. She is a Pisces Sun, Virgo Moon, Leo Rising, and a 5/1 emotional manifesting generator. Jacquelyn has overcome countless dark nights of the soul as a serial entrepreneur. So she's here to share her story to help you feel more at ease on your journey. This was a great conversation, and I can't wait to dive in. Welcome to Float Activity, a place to inspire and empower beings to embrace self-love and self-development for an achievable balance of productivity. I share different ways to come back to your intuition through spirituality, self-care, human design, cycle planning, wellness, and everything in between. Thank you so much for joining me this week. If this is your first time, welcome. And if you've been here with me before, thank you so much for coming back. I'm so excited to join you in this journey as we learn together. Hi, Jacquelyn. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
I always love to dive in with my first question. What are your favorite self-care practices that you do on the daily basis or weekly basis?
Ooh, that's such a good one. I feel like some of my favorite ones include taking a bath, a bubble bath, doing any type of skincare practice. I feel like is just really soothing for me, or listening to sound healing music is also another one.
I love that so much. I actually listen to sound healing 99% of my day. Like, I'm listening to them now during our episode. Like, I
I love
usually
it.
have them in the background. So, huge fan of sound healing. And I feel like it helps so much. And I do meditations on my podcast sometimes. And there's usually those frequencies in the background as well. I have a question about taking a bath. In your astrology chart, do you have a lot of water
I
in?
do. I'm a
Okay.
Pisces sun with a Pisces Venus, so it makes sense. And I have a Cancer South node.
Yeah.
Cancer is my 12th house, actually. So I feel like it's
Okay.
very soothing.
Yeah, I wondered because I actually don't have a lot of water in my chart, but I love water. I feel like I, like, crave it because my chart has literally very little water in it. So
Oh,
I always
interesting.
wonder how our charts ultimately, like, can help with our self-care, like, balance it out and stuff like that. So that's
Totally.
fun to know. I would love if you could share with listeners your spiritual awakening journey and the hard lessons that brought you to becoming a spiritual content creator.
Totally. Oh my God. This is going to be a loaded story. Yeah. So I grew up in a very religious household. So I have a lot of religious trauma, but I feel like that kind of gave me insight that there was a spiritual world. And being a Pisces, I was always very intrigued. And I felt like there was more to spirituality than what I knew from my Christianity background. And my spiritual awakening really happened after I decided to leave a toxic 13-year relationship. So being in that relationship was just holding me back from so many things. And I had a lot of unhealed trauma, a lot of codependency, just like regular relationship, childhood trauma stuff that I wasn't aware of. And my spiritual awakening, it was really like this moment that happened because I had just left that relationship. I moved out with my best friend. And I remember this one day, I just had an episode of, I don't know if it was food poisoning or the stomach flu or something. And I was just throwing up so many times. I went to the hospital. And then after that, I was never the same. I feel like it was really the universe telling me that I was in a safe place now and I needed to heal. And all my unresolved trauma was coming out in terms of like health symptoms in my body. And it happened right before my Saturn return. My Saturn is in my sixth house of health. So it kind of makes sense. So that happened. And I dove into this journey of just healing my trauma, just figuring out what was going on. And right before that, my best friend had dabbled in astrology and she was telling me about it. And I didn't really know about astrology growing up because of my Christian background. It was just this taboo thing. But I didn't realize there was so much depth to astrology. And when I figured that out, it just really intrigued me. I know now that I was actually an astrologer in many past lives. So it kind of makes sense that I'm so into it. And that's kind of how it started.
Yeah, it was like your body was purging, like, "No, no, we're gonna get all that out," and then you're gonna realize, like, as you propel yourself forward. That makes sense, looking back on it now, but I'm sure going through all that at that time, you're like, "What in the world?" Like, my world around me is crumbling and being that sick. So many people, they either don't realize or they come to realization that a lot of the times when we're going through those symptoms, like, our body is saying, like, how you're operating, it's not doing you any good. And so I had something similar with my own where I was having so many GI issues, and then it was kinda like transition to once I understood my human design and that sacral response, and I started listening to that sacral response, my GI issues started to go away. And so it's just crazy that, like, if we understand how we operate, who we are as a person, we lean into that, a lot of times, our ailments will disappear when we are, like, aligned with our soul.
Totally. I feel like that's very, very much true. Like, I think the more that I got into alignment, the better my body started feeling. I discovered Louise Hay at that time. Not sure if you're familiar, but
Yes.
literally her book is my Bible. Like those affirmations just got me through so much. And I feel like when I stopped putting a timeline on my healing and a deadline, I started just feeling a lot better when I surrendered to the process.
Yeah. I mean, I find that with so much of my business was like I kept being like, okay, when I get here, this and like so goal oriented. And it's like when we can lean into what the process is, it's so much easier, it's so much better. And like just kind of bringing it with my personal life, like my husband, he always would joke, like we would be on one vacation and I'd already be planning the next vacation. I didn't know how to, like, enjoy the process of everything, and so I found myself having the opportunity to start over in my career, like, start something new, and I was, like, following those same patterns, and then things got so much easier when I literally surrendered into the process and, like, was like, "Okay, however long it takes, it's gonna take." Healing, business, whatever it is. And when we fight that, it's like that's when we're like up, against the universe. And the universe is like, yo, when are you gonna like calm down? Right?
I feel that's so hard. Like I've had so many pivots in my career, literally like 10 plus pivots, being a manifesting generator. And I relate to that a lot. Like I would repeat the same unhealthy patterns until finally I realized those were the things holding me back. And I feel like when I finally decided to learn my lesson, I could move on to the next thing.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. If it keeps happening, like we gotta do something different, right? That's like the whole purpose of life. It's like, hey, why does this keep happening to me? Oh, it's because I'm not learning the lesson. Like what can I learn in it? And s
Exactly.
yeah, and so, like, you mentioned your Saturn return, and I know when I was on your podcast, you would ask me about my Saturn return, and I wanna be clear, like, I want to say that, like, bravo to you to, like, figuring out who you are as early as you have, like, I know the journey hasn't been easy, so I'm not discounting that by any means, but still so much in my life was I not living in my design, like, I was still fighting it, and so while I had moments of clarity during it, I still don't think having my Saturn return when I wasn't really, like, I don't know the correct terminology, but, like, spiritually awakened, I guess you can say, is different because I was still so lost in who I really was. I was still in this other version. So I would love to know your journey having the spiritual background through your Saturn return and what it's been like for you.
Well, I feel like it didn't necessarily make it any easier. Maybe a little bit, like on the mindset. I was like, okay, I know that this is gonna end or it's gonna go to the next chapter in my life. But I feel like during my Saturn return, a lot of my deepest, darkest fears came up. And essentially, I faced a lot of my worst nightmares. And I think what helped me was when I finally accepted those things that were happening, they weren't as bad as I made it out to be in my mind. And I feel like now I'm so much calmer with life and I'm like at peace because I experienced all those uncomfortable moments. And I'm like, okay, I feel like the universe is showing me that no matter what happens, it's all going to be okay. And if something doesn't go the way that I want it to go, it just means that the universe has a better plan. So I think the main lesson that I learned was to practice detachment because detachment is truly freedom.
Yeah, that's so powerful for sure. And I mean, that is a great perspective to have. And I have that lesson of the control factor. You know what I mean? Like wanting to control it. And there's been so much where I'm like, well, this isn't working out how I envisioned. But sometimes we fight that and the universe is like, I'm not going to give you anything then, right? Like I'm going to withhold it, and then you surrender into it and you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is more than I ever could expect." I feel like that control factor, I feel you on that. My other life lesson is patience. So, like, stop controlling, sit back, enjoy the ride. Doesn't make it any easier at all.
For sure. I feel like definitely one of my lessons has been to learn patience as well. I feel like all throughout my 20s, I was very impatient. Because I was very ambitious and I wanted to achieve. I have a Capricorn North node. My Mercury is in Aries. And I found that the more that I forced it, the more that I rushed it, the more I would just prolong my own suffering. And I realized that I needed to go through all the things that I went through. So now it's like, I have the wisdom that I have, or else I wouldn't know what I know now if I didn't go through all those things.
So you knew astrology when you were going through your Saturn return. So did that give you a little bit more insight of like, this isn't going to be a pretty ride, but at least I know that it's going to be in my sixth house? Or wait, did you say it was in your sixth house? I forget
Yes,
what you said.
in my
Okay.
spouse.
Yeah. So your sixth house. So yeah, did it help you navigate more because you had that background of knowing your chart and what that meant?
I think eventually I started picking up on it more. I think the way that I use astrology now is really to help me accept like the energy that's going on in the present. So I always know like if there's like a very intense transit going on, I might not be feeling my best or the collective might feel very heightened. So there might be just a lot of emotions, a lot of energy going on. So, and then I'm like, if anything comes up during this time, I know that it's meant to come up because it's helping me overcome something. So it kind of just, I don't even know what the word is. I guess it does kind of give me a bit more peace knowing there's a reason for what's happening. And I kind of know that, okay, the next season it's going to feel different. And I think that helped me kind of push through better.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's one thing that I love about astrology is it can be taken in so many different contexts of like you're using it to prepare you for what's next. For me, I use astrology of like I am having a hard time showing up on social media. So like where could I look in my chart to kind of embody what I need to be to kind of get through that? And so like I'm looking at of like here's my astrology blueprint of who I am. What energy can I bring to help me break through this barrier? Because I feel like social media for me, it's been a hate relationship, but I also like want it. I want that community. I want that connection. And honestly, it wasn't until TikTok did I feel that connection with it. I kept trying to be this version of Instagram that I did not like. It never felt resonant with me. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I've used astrology for myself or anybody else that's having like a block. You know, how can we get through this block? What energy can we use? Not saying like I would love to have someone in my back pocket to be like, okay, here's the transits, here's going on because like I get it, I know how to do it. It's just not something like I'm willing to put the time and energy to. So like knowing that different astrologers can use different aspects of it.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many different ways of practicing. And as you were mentioning that, I'm just so curious. What is your Chiron sign? Do you know?
I am a visual person, so pull it up real quick.
That's so
It's
funny
like
that you say that. I feel like I feel like with my own chart, sometimes it's like there's something that I know already, but then in a different chapter of my life, I'm like, oh my goodness, it was also telling me this, but I didn't see that like deeper layer. And I feel like that's why I love astrology because I feel like it's like never ending
Yeah.
when you study it.
I know. It's like, "Oh, wait, I thought I figured it out," but then there's so much more to dive into it. So, yeah, my Chiron is in Taurus in my 10th house.
Oh, wow. That is so interesting. I
Yeah.
can see if it's in the 10th house, maybe it's like this fear of being seen because the 10th house is of the public reputation.
I mean, pretty much my chart, it's like everything is in Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Leo, and then the rest of it is down here. So, like, everything's at the top and at the bottom. There's, like, nothing on the sides. I have a stellium in Taurus as well. So, like, I got a
Wow.
lot of heavy Taurus energy happening. So, good and
Interesting.
bad.
I love Taurus energy, to be honest. I feel like it's one of my favorite signs, or like I really love it, especially when it's like Taurus moon. I feel like it's very relaxing and grounding. I seem to attract a lot of Taurus placements in my life. So I think it's something that really helps me.
Helps me so much. My husband is a Taurus sun and moon. My daughter is Taurus, and, like, he grounds me because my, like, Aries fire is like, "Watch out." And he's like, "Bring it down." Like, "Let's turn that down a little bit." So, yeah, he really balances me out a ton when it comes to my fiery energy.
I
So, yeah,
love that. I love that
feel
so
that.
much.
My sister's also a Taurus. We got a lot of Taurus in our family, so
Wow.
I know you brought up your human design a little bit. We're both manifesting generators, so I'm sure you can feel that energy of me being a manifesting generator and being an Aries sun, you know what I mean? It's just like some people just are like, "What in the world?" Or they're like, "How can you get so much done?" Like, what is the secret? I'm like, 1, I'm built this way, and 2, I think we brought it up in the episode when I was on your podcast, but, like, I literally batch my content around my cycle so that, like, when I'm productive, it's like, "Get out of my way. This is what I'm doing. I'm gonna do as much as I can in this time, and then I'm not gonna force it in the other times." And so I've, like, figured out what my design is and used it to the maximum efficiency. And I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's my manifesting generator. I don't know if that's my Aries sun, but efficiency is my goal in life with everything.
I love it. I feel like could be some of that Aries energy. It's very like direct and goal oriented.
Yeah, for sure. So, like, what's been your experience being a manifesting generator?
I feel like when I was younger, I feel like I had a lot of energy, like constantly this energizer bunny bouncing off the walls. And I feel like I guess when I started getting into fitness, like I used to be a really big fitness junkie. I feel like that helped me release a lot of my energy. I feel like I feel my best when I'm like actively moving my body. But it's kind of funny because throughout my Saturn return, I was like knocked out, like in bed all the time. So that was very different for me. But I think kind of similar to you about how you've been working with your cycle. I think that's also something that I've noticed. Like when I have more energy, I'll just go harder and do all the things that I can. But as it's getting closer to my period, I slow down usually and I just kind of rest and take a break for those few weeks. And I think being a manifesting generator, one of the top things that I've noticed is that I have to enjoy what I'm doing, or else the energy is so low and it affects the people around me. Like if I'm not happy doing what I'm doing. So I really made it a priority to find my joy in life and make sure that I love what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's so important. When I was a hairstylist, I loved my work, like coworkers. I loved the clients, but like in general, it was literally like an energy leakage from me. Like it wasn't lighting me up. And so I feel like that was not listening to my sacral, and you're an emotional response,
Yeah.
right? And so I would love to know, like, being a manifesting generator with the emotional solar plexus response. Like, what is that like for you? Because my husband is a generator with an emotional, and I see it with him. But he's Taurus. He's just like, I can sit back and relax and like he's the most chill guy in the whole world. So he doesn't have that manifesting generator spark to it, just the generator.
I feel like I've learned that I'm a very emotional person. So I'll go through a bunch of emotions. And I think I've learned to really ride the wave. So especially if I'm making a big decision in life, I don't make it impulsively. I used to, like I went before I knew about human design, because my emotions are so high and so low, I would tend to make decisions when I was at that high point because I was very excited and like my Aries Mercury wanted to go. But then I realized now that it's not the best for me to make decisions when I'm like super high or super low. And I kind of ride it out. And I find that I do gain more clarity as time goes on. I think it's different for every single decision. Like sometimes the emotional wave is longer, sometimes it's shorter. But I kind of learned to not freak out like in the early stages of the emotional wave. I think before I would have these panic moments and like it would affect the people around me. Like I would talk to my partner like every time I had an emotional like burst, when I feel like sometimes it's just something I needed to go through myself. And once I feel that clarity, then I can jump and make that decision.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so, you still have your sacral defined, so you still feel it in your body. It's just making sure that you get through that wave, that you really make that decision. Okay.
Totally.
I mean, my husband's always told me that he needs time to make decisions, and so I will give him that. He loves to support me in all the things that I love, but he is not someone that wants his human design, like, broken down for him or his astrology chart, but he's happy to listen to the things that I wanna talk about. But, like, we've been together for over 20 years, and he's, like, always told me, like, he needs to process his decisions. It was not until I looked at his human design was like, "Oh, you need time." And he's like, "Yes, you don't need a chart to tell me. Like, I know that's how it is." And I'm like, "Yeah, but when I'm built with an instant answer, then I know where to take action. But my emotional or solar plexus is undefined." And so a piece of that for me was understanding that I am so susceptible to other people's emotions, and I always thought I was an emotional person. But
Mhm,
then when I'm by myself, I'm not. And so learning that idea of like, "Oh, wait, that's not my emotion I'm holding on to." And so that
mhm.
was another piece that I feel like when I realized, I was like, "No wonder I got burnt out. I didn't have boundaries. I didn't understand the energetics of other people's emotions." So, yeah, I get that for sure.
Yeah, I feel like the people that I know with the open centers, like it must be so amplified when you feel other people's emotions. And it's kind of, I feel like it's this balance for me between the sacral and the emotional, because I do enjoy being a very spontaneous person. And I think when I have the fire energy in me, like wants to make very quick decisions. So it kind of depends. Like sometimes certain decisions, I do feel like I can make a decision right away, but I think it's when it's something that's a bigger decision, something more important that's gonna affect, like, a lot of things around me, that's when I need to take time, or if I'm feeling like I just don't know what my gut is telling me right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes I enjoy being spontaneous as well, so it's interesting.
Yeah. So, is there any other part of your human design that is like a struggle for you to kind of wrap your head around and use for yourself that you feel like it's like, oh, this keeps coming up. Like, I don't know how to break through that?
I feel like the struggle for me is embracing my open centers, because I just feel like sometimes I will feel the energy of other people with the defined centers so strongly. And I don't know how to shed that energy. Because for me, my spleen is open, my head, and my ajna, which isn't a lot. I do have a lot of defined centers. But sometimes when I'm around someone, for example, who has a defined head, and maybe they're like going through something on their own, like they're really trying to seek answers. It just bothers me because I feel a lot of pressure in my head and I don't know the best way to release it. I feel like I have like certain rituals that I do, but that's still definitely a challenge for me.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I feel like a lot of the people that I've read their charts for who are psychics and mediums, they have actually so much open in their chart. And it makes sense because they're reflecting that. Not saying that someone has to have openness in their chart to have those, but seeing that. And it's like, yeah, how could you not? Because I know how intensified it is for the emotional center. I also have my spleen open and I have the my heart and my ego. wide open with no gates, no channels. And so like proving my worth is like a forever thing that I just like can't get over. Like it's just like I'm like I'm doing it. I'm doing it. And then there's something that that I'm doing. I always feel like I need to be beyond productive to prove myself or when I get there. And so that's my forever lesson on my human design and the emotional center, those two. So I get that because that is the case. It's like, how do we navigate this openness because we're absorbing other people or we're just not being able to kind of like jump through it. Just kind of too, like touching on your profile. I know human design is like the same thing with astrology. Other people can take different aspects of it. And so something that I've been studying recently is the difference between like left angle, right angle. And so yours is left angle, which means you have transpersonal karma. Everyone you meet comes into your life for a reason, and you're designed to fulfill your interactions with other people. And so, wondering with that, like what you're feeling about that. Does that feel aligned with what you're doing? Are you ready to make a real change in your life? Here are just a few benefits on working with me as a certified holistic coach. Together, we gain insight into your authentic self. We explore your design with modalities like human design, psychovitality, and astrology. And you'll gain a deeper understanding of your unique strengths, challenges, and your purpose in life. Together, we work on improving relationships. Understanding your own design helps you communicate more effectively with other people, build stronger relationships, and have more fulfilling connections around you. We increase your productivity. By aligning your work with your natural rhythms and your strengths, you'll be able to work smarter and not harder, achieve your goals, and live with a greater ease in your life. We work together on reducing stress and overwhelm. By working with me, you'll learn how to manage your energy, reduce stress, and cultivate more balance in your life. We work on a more authentic life. When you're aligned with your unique design, you'll feel more confident, empowered, and fulfilled in every area of your life. Those are the benefits with working with me. As a certified intuitive life coach, my focus is not telling people about their human design, psychovitality, or even astrology. Instead, my role is to help you discover and align with your desires and take aligned action based on how you operate. It is time for you to look within at how powerful you are and welcome your intuitive intelligence. If you want to work with me, head to karadempsey.com/offerings.
That feels so resonates so much. I feel that so hard. I feel like I always meet people for a reason. And I feel like I learn a lot of the lessons that I'm meant to learn through my interactions with people. So I do feel like that aligns. And I think sometimes I relate human design back to astrology. And I feel like that really relates to a lot of my Aquarius placements. Like I have an Aquarius Mars, Aquarius part of fortune. And I feel like Aquarius is very much about our interactions with other people, the collective, just like groups in general. So yes, I feel that so hard.
Yeah, when I realized mine is the right angle, and so mine is all about personal destiny. I've always had this pull of feeling selfish in the way that I want to figure out who I am, how I operate, what works best for me. And I feel like sometimes I feel like I'm being selfish. I feel like people tell me I'm being selfish. And then when I read that it's all about me and that I don't need to interact with certain people to live out my destiny, but I do enjoy it. My favorite thing in life is having the interactions. It's not my destiny that an interaction will point me in one way or another, but I do also believe in divine timing and when I come across people at the same time. But when I saw that my destiny is personal, I was like, okay, now I don't feel so selfish in what I'm doing because that's really it. I want to learn everything, but I also want to share it with my community. That 1/4 of the investigator and then network with people to tell them about it.
I love that. I feel like human design really gives us permission to be ourselves. And sometimes there is this conditioning that we have from people around us, society, whatever, telling us that we're not supposed to be a certain way. But when we see our human design, it's like we're actually meant to be this way.
And so if someone was new to this journey of embodying their true authentic self, but didn't know how, what guidance do you think you would tell them in this journey?
I would say that more and more things will be revealed to you in the right timing. So even like if you're someone who's studying human design, astrology, like don't feel like you need to understand it all at once in the beginning because you won't. I didn't for sure. It was a journey. And I feel like even now, like more and more things get revealed to me and I get deeper insights, like when the time is right, when my intuition is guiding me to it. So I think it's to just allow the flow of life to happen and to not rush.
That makes sense, and I mean, I definitely was that person. I feel like anybody that gets, like, a whiff of spiritual awakening, they're like, "Oh, the things, I want it all," and it's just like, really? It comes down to all we need is ourselves, and, like, giving ourselves time and space to really process what we're going through is really all you need in this, like, spiritual path. We don't need the crystals. Do they look nice? Do they feel nice? Energetically, are they great to have around? Yes. But, like, I feel like I see so many people that are like, "This, that, courses, and all this," and it's just like, take a moment, and the best thing you can do too is just, like, yeah, like, intuition. Like, rely on yourself in the process and maybe stop looking outside of themselves so much, because that can get overwhelming. You're trying it, like, muddles the message of, like, who you are and how you can really step in to be that best version of yourself, right?
I agree with that so much. Like, I feel like a lot of the lessons that I went through in my life, the very expensive lessons, they all taught me that everything I need is basically inside me already. And I didn't need to look for something outside of me to give me the answer. So, what you said is completely on point.
Yeah, I think the only thing I wish I would have been more open to was a coach because I was like, I don't need that. I can research, I can do all the things on my own. But then once I started realizing what a coach actually is and how they actually help you, like, see your blind spots, connect you with yourself. And there was a lot in the beginning where I was just like, no, no one needs a coach. You could do it on your own. I feel like I've made more momentum having a coach to help me through because they're like, this is who you are. I'm going to reflect back everything that you want. You know what I mean? That's their job. They're not really supposed to direct you outside of yourself. I think seeing that and using your intuition on who you feel connected with in the process, but it's like so many things can be overwhelming and in the process of figuring out this whole journey we are on.
For sure, for sure. I've had like very interesting experiences with coaching. Like I feel like every time I invested in a coach, I thought I was going in to learn one thing and then it was a whole different lesson, which was a very important lesson, but it was just something that I never knew I was getting myself into.
Yeah, I mean, they really put a light on your blind spots, and you're like, "Oh, I didn't realize I sabotaged myself like that so much, or that I, don't realize the progress that I'm making in the process." Coaches, they really help. If they're trained right, they do it the right way. There are obviously bad things out there everywhere, but I'm glad that you've had a good lesson of using a coach as well, because they can really help us in the process. So I know that we are both Leo risings, and I would love if you could just kind of explain to listeners like what a rising sign is and how we can utilize this energy.
So I would say your rising sign is your outlook on life. And it's essentially what people see when they first meet you. Like, I feel like it's more of your personality rather than your sun sign. So I feel like it's really how you present yourself to the world. And back when I was still doing business coaching, I would always tell my clients, like, your rising sign is kind of like the face of your brand. Like, who do you want to show up as? And I feel like the way that I use astrology is to tap into more of the evolved trait of the signs and placements that you have and to be aware of the shadow tendencies. Because I always catch myself being like, oh, my shadow tendency of this sign is acting up. So I feel like to embrace your rising sign, learn kind of what the negatives and the positives are, and then try to step more into the positive trait.
I had a hard time with being a Leo rising because I was like, I don't really want to like show up like a Leo rising. So I felt like for me, it did get me out of my shell of like coming out on social media and being more, a Leo rising. But it took me just kind of learning each of the different traits and understanding like, okay, yeah, there's plus signs, there's minus signs, and just using it for our benefit and what we're trying to create. I get that. Is there anything with being a Leo rising that really comes up for you in the shadow side a lot?
Well, it's actually I have a really funny story about my rising sign. So, I actually didn't even know I was a Leo rising for I feel like at least a few years because I had my birth time wrong and I thought I was a Virgo rising, which also kind of made sense a little bit because I have a Virgo moon. So, I didn't really know how to differentiate what was my moon and my Leo rising at that time. And then I think it was last year or something. It was quite recent where I found out that I was a Leo rising because I was doing this quiz online, like figuring out like your birth time rectification. And it said I was a Leo rising. And then I was like talking to my friends about it, and they were like, you are totally a Leo rising. And I didn't even see it before. But when I look back on my childhood, like I always loved posing in weird poses in my photos. Like I loved to perform. But it's interesting because I also have a Leo Chiron. So I feel like it kind of hinders the Leo rising in me. Like as I grew older, I started getting more fearful of being seen and being recognized. So it's kind of a weird thing because now I feel like there's moments where I embrace my Leo rising a lot where like I'm able to show up and shine. Like I do enjoy being the center of attention. But when that Leo Chiron acts up, then I get afraid of showing up. So I think that's kind of the battle for me.
Yeah, I don't like that attention very much. I think if I could be my name could be famous, but my face wouldn't be, I would be super excited about that. So I feel like that's the part of the Leo rising where I'm like, okay, like so much of my chart is like me showing up, me making myself the face of what I'm doing. And so that's been a lot of me stepping outside my comfort zone. But, as I try it, I'm like, okay, I try this on. And I've always felt like in past lives, I've been famous. I've always like had this like undercurrent of like this thing where I think that's why I'm afraid is because like it hasn't turned out for me in the past of being a public face. And so it's like a wound of mine that like I didn't know existed. So I've had some like shamans kind of tell me like, ooh, uh-oh. And I'm like, okay, I
That's
feel
so
that.
that's so interesting. I wonder if you have a lot of like placements in either like your fourth house, eighth house, or 12th house, like the water sign houses. Do you know
I have my Jupiter and my Uranus in 4th house. What other were you saying?
the eighth
That's
house, the eighth house, and the 12th house?
nothing, nothing.
Interesting. Because I
I
also
know.
wonder if it's maybe the energy of Taurus as well, because I feel like Taurus sometimes have a tendency to be more private since it is like the opposite of Scorpio as well. And those two signs are always like they don't want to be in the forefront so much.
Yeah, yeah. I've had a lot of people in my coaching come to me about having a hard time making money and what's something that we could look into their chart to help them. Because I know like the 8th house is finances and business and transformation. So it's like, what would be the best way to kind of look at that in a way to say, like, maybe this could help you break through that barrier of figuring out the best way?
There would be three places that I would look at specifically, I think. First, I would look at the Venus placement and the Jupiter placement because Venus is about how you can allow flow and ease to come into your life, especially with money and love. And Jupiter, I like to look at because that shows how you can attract more abundance in your life, how you can manifest essentially. And I would look at the second house because the second house tells us about how you make and how you make money, how you spend money. So I feel like there's a few more houses. Like I would look at also the eighth house and like if they're looking career wise, the sixth house, the 10th house, there's a bunch of things. So I feel like intuitively you would probably be called to a certain place in their chart. And then once they say something, maybe like they have some type of financial trauma or like trauma that relates to finances. And then a spot in the chart would kind of pop up.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, because that's kind of the thing is it hasn't been consistent where I look at it where I'm like, "Oh, this is what's blocking you," and just kinda helping them through it, and it's just like, yeah, there's so many aspects. I mean, that's the thing about astrology is there's so many places that you can kinda look at it and help people break through that. Yeah, I appreciate that and breaking that down for us. So I loved everything about this conversation and breaking down, I love all things astrology and human design. So I'd love to know your offerings and how listeners can connect with you.
So right now you can connect with me on TikTok or on Instagram. My handle is at astrobabe1234. I also have my own podcast, Glow Radio. It's available on all the podcast platforms. And one of my main offerings is my Astrology 101 guide, which includes all my definitions. It's like a really hefty guide. I think it's like over 118 pages. So if you ever want to learn how to read your own natal chart, you can go check that out and download it.
That's awesome. I will make sure all of that is in the show notes. And I'm just appreciative of us crossing paths, of course, on TikTok. I feel like I've met so many spiritually aligned people in this process. So I am grateful for TikTok. Please don't get banned. Of course, I have to add that in there, but it was so nice for you to come on. And yeah, I appreciate you taking your time to come on. And yeah, I was on Jacqueline's podcast. So check that out. I will also put that episode in the show notes as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This was such a fun conversation. I always love talking about human design, astrology. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. If this was your first time, welcome. And if you've joined me for previous episodes, thank you so much for coming back. Before you go, could you share my show with a friend and subscribe? Those few seconds make a big impact on my show, and I'd be grateful for the support. I absolutely love this interview with Jacqueline. I loved how we dived into human design and astrology and how it's helped us through our spiritual journey. If you want to find out how to connect with her, you can check the show notes and all the links mentioned at karadempsey.com/59. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll chat soon.